Something ancient is awakening now, and the sense of urgency you feel is not stress. It is the beginning of a shift in consciousness that Thoth foresaw millennia ago. Time seems to be slipping through your fingers because you are trying to sustain a mental model that has already died. There is a hidden record in your own biology that explains why the world's structures are crumbling and why only a specific group of people are beginning to see what comes next. The exhaustion that dominates your day is not a lack of organization, it is a reflection of accelerated global entropy. While science describes the disorder, the ancient initiates knew that this collapse is the necessary precursor to the opening of a portal that changes how you process reality. You are not just witnessing the end of an era, you are being summoned to the awakening of a deep cellular memory that modern humanity has chosen to ignore. If you feel you have been called to this moment, comment, "I accept the initiation." The clock seems to be racing against human nature lately. Each passing second carries a heavier weight than the last on the shoulders of those trying to keep up with the frenetic pace of cities. The feeling that the day ended before it even began has become a bitter constant in contemporary urban life. Mental exhaustion shouldn't be seen merely as an individual failing or a simple lack of personal organization. There is a profound exhaustion that stems from the desperate attempt to sustain thought patterns that no longer serve life's purpose. Humanity today walks on a tightrope where balance seems increasingly distant and difficult to achieve. Science explains this phenomenon through the idea that everything in the universe naturally tends towards chaos and total disorder. The second law of thermodynamics suggests that energy inevitably dissipates, and the original organization is eventually lost over the centuries. What people experience today as chronic stress is actually a reflection of this accelerated entropy on an unprecedented global scale. The system that once seemed solid and unshakable now shows deep cracks that no one can ignore for much longer. Social and mental structures are crumbling under the pressure of an invisible force that demands a radical change in attitude. The collapse of what is known signals that the old way of inhabiting the world has reached its maximum limit of physical and psychic resistance. Western man has learned to see time only as a straight arrow advancing towards the future without ever looking back. This linear view creates the dangerous illusion of infinite progress, where the past is treated as something to be overcome or simply forgotten. However, archaic cultures understood existence through perfect cycles that repeat themselves like the movement of the tides or the seasons. For the ancient sages, time was a wheel that allowed a constant return to essence through the attentive observation of natural rhythms. When humanity disconnects from these great cycles, it loses the rhythm of its own breath and the greater meaning of life. The brutal divorce between the rhythm of nature and the rhythm of technology has generated an abyss of meaning that consumes modern consciousness. The current crisis is not merely economic or political, but rather a profound failure in the basic perception of immediate reality. The human gaze has become addicted to shiny surfaces and quick fixes that fail to fill the ever-growing inner void. People observe global events like passive spectators of a disaster movie that seems completely out of control. This passivity prevents the fundamental understanding that external disorder is merely a direct reflection of a far more serious internal disconnect. The exhaustion that overwhelms our bodies is the cry of a soul that no longer recognizes the artificial world it helped to build. We must stop frantically running to understand where our feet are truly leading us at this crucial moment in history. Amidst this constant whirlwind of useless information and deafening noise, something very old and silent is beginning to awaken again. There is an objective record that has survived the centuries and remains guarded beyond the reach of common, hurried vision. This essential knowledge is not in traditional textbooks or in the search algorithms that dominate the internet today. It resides in a deep layer of cellular memory that modern humanity has chosen to ignore in order to focus only on immediate consumption. The feeling of urgency that everyone feels in their chest is a sign that this record is about to be revealed to those who know how to observe. There is a hidden record that explains why time seems to be slipping through our fingers so overwhelmingly now. Beyond the deafening noise of the modern world, there exists a figure representing the objective memory of all that is. In ancient Egypt, this force was personified as the master of writing and the precise measurer of time. He was not merely a god in a temple, but the very embodiment of the logic that keeps the stars in their paths. Every breath taken and every word spoken was seen as a mark in an eternal book that never fades. This guardian of knowledge ensured that nothing was truly lost to the entropy we discussed earlier. To understand our current confusion, we need to look at the one who holds the pen of reality. Plato once recounted a conversation between an ancient king and the divine inventor of letters and numbers. The recorder offered writing as a remedy for memory and a tool for the wisdom of the people. However, the king wisely noted that such a tool could also lead to profound inner forgetfulness. By relying on external marks, the human soul would risk losing the ability to recall the truth within itself. This tension between recorded data and lived wisdom is at the heart of our modern struggle with information overload. We fill our libraries and hard drives while our inner compass grows silent and covered in dust. Egyptian scribes were much more than mere bureaucrats recording grain harvests or royal decrees. They saw their craft as a sacred duty to maintain the balance of the entire manifested universe. This balance was the principle of fundamental order that prevents the world from returning to primordial chaos. Each stroke of the reed pen was an act of creation that anchored divine law in the physical realm. When a scribe worked, he was aligning his own heartbeat with the rhythm of the cosmic spheres. Their dedication shows that keeping a record is a way of protecting the very fabric of existence. You realize that this figure of the recorder, of this eternal scribe, is not just a myth, but the key to you not being swept away by the chaos of this entropy we are living in? The big problem is that most people feel that time is slipping away, but they do not have the vibrational map to read the signs of this new cycle. Few are truly awakening to the original frequency of Thoth right now, and the truth is that this window of transition will not remain open forever. Those who do not learn to hold the pen of their own reality now will end up getting lost in informational noise. That is why I organized the Logos Code, which is the recovery of this history and this ancient knowledge, and I left the link in the first pinned comment. It is knowledge for those who feel they can no longer wait for the system to collapse before taking action. It is your access code to order in the midst of chaos. This eternal recorder remains outside the flow of human emotion and the bias of limited personal perspective. It represents the part of the mind that can observe a storm without being swept away by the strong wind. In the Hall of Truth, it is the one that weighs the heart against the lightness of a single feather. This process is not about judgment in the way we usually understand that concept today. It is an assessment of how much of our original light remains after a lifetime of material friction. The recorder only cares about the frequency that vibrates beneath the surface of our daily actions. The records left by this guardian were never meant to be read solely by the eyes of the rational intellect. They are encoded in a language that ignores the ego's chatter and speaks directly to the spirit. As the structure of the current world begins to crumble, these ancient maps are becoming visible once more. We are called to stop looking at the distraction and begin to read the signs of the great transition. To decipher what was written for this specific moment, a different state of being is absolutely necessary. What this guardian left recorded for the exact moment when order began to crumble. The modern world functions like a constant factory of distractions designed to keep the mind on high alert. Every notification and every useless news snippet creates static that blocks the subtlest signals of existence. We become addicted to the friction of external stimuli because we fear what we might find in the absence of sound. This exhaustion is not just mental, but a biological overload that prevents the deeper gears of perception from turning. To hear the message left by the eternal recorder, we must first learn to dismantle the wall of noise we have built around ourselves. This process begins with the voluntary choice to step away from the digital chorus for a moment of true stillness. In ancient schools of wisdom, the first lesson for any seeker was the rigorous practice of absolute silence. Students spent years without uttering a single word to learn to listen to the movements of their own minds. They understood that the voice of the ego is noisy and repetitive, while the voice of truth speaks in the gaps between thoughts. By quieting their tongues, they forced their inner senses to sharpen and detect the underlying frequency of the cosmos. This was not a punishment, but a necessary purification to ensure that the inner mirror was clean and steady. Only when the inner chatter ceases can the individual begin to perceive the hidden architecture of reality. Modern science now confirms what those ancient practitioners knew through direct experience and patient observation. When we enter a state of deep contemplation, our brainwaves shift from the agitated beta state to the calm of alpha and theta. At these specific frequencies, the logical filters of the conscious mind loosen their grip on our perception of time and space. This is the biological gateway, where the brain stops merely reacting to the environment and begins processing intuitive information. It is a state of active receptivity where our body's hardware aligns with a much larger and older software. In this zone of neural tranquility, the noise of the world is replaced by a profound and rhythmic clarity. Filtering through the informational mud of today requires a discipline that few are willing to seriously cultivate. Most people remain trapped in the superficial layers of consciousness, reacting to each wave without ever seeing the ocean. Deep intuition is not a magical gift granted to a lucky few, but a natural function of a tranquilized system. When you stop feeding the fire of anxiety with constant data, the flames diminish and reveal the glowing embers of wisdom. You begin to recognize patterns that have always been there, but have been obscured by the frenetic pace of your daily life. This new way of seeing does not come from books or screens, but from the resonance of your own inner silence. As you settle into this deliberate calm, the weight of the material world seems to lose its suffocating power over you. You are no longer a victim of the clock or the endless demands of a society that has lost its way. The space created by your silence becomes a vessel ready to receive a much older and more powerful transmission. There is a rhythm playing in the depths of the universe that only reveals itself to those who have stopped shouting. This frequency is the bridge between your individual life and the vast cycles that govern the rise and fall of civilizations. At the center of this silence, a specific frequency begins to be transmitted to those who are ready. When silence settles in, the individual begins to notice that time is not a straight line running into the void. There is a colossal mechanism spinning above our heads while we sleep and work. The sky is not merely a static backdrop, but the face of a clock of unimaginable proportions. Each star occupies a position that dictates the tone of human experience on Earth. The ancients looked up and saw not just lights, but the gears of a collective destiny in motion. This subtle and constant movement is what truly governs the tides of history and the soul. Our planet's axis has a slow wobble that takes millennia to complete a single rotation. This astronomical phenomenon alters the constellation that appears on the horizon during the beginning of spring. Thousands of years pass while humanity traverses different zones of energetic influence in space. The precession of the equinoxes acts as the great engine that alters the mental climate of entire civilizations. When the axis shifts, the truths of one era begin to lose their meaning for subsequent generations. We are all navigating a planetary ship that alters its course according to higher orders. Vedic traditions and the sages of Egypt called these periods great years, or yuga cycles. They understood that human consciousness expands and contracts as we approach or move away from certain galactic centers. There are golden ages where perception is clear and iron ages where spiritual blindness prevails. Circular time ensures that nothing is lost forever and that each lesson returns in a higher octave. The end of one of these cycles is not an isolated catastrophic event, but a change in the quality of light we receive. The record of these changes is engraved in the stones of temples and in the rhythm of the fixed stars. The human psyche is not isolated from the rest of the universe and reacts to these cosmic fluctuations with mathematical precision. We feel a growing unease when old ways of thinking cease to resonate with Earth's new position in space. The pressure many feel today is not merely the result of political problems or passing economic crises. It is the friction between a consciousness that wishes to remain in the past and a cosmos that demands movement. The central nervous system acts as an antenna, picking up the frequency shift occurring in the galactic environment. Ignoring this call is like trying to keep the lights on while the power source is being changed. We are living through the precise moment when the needle of this giant clock crosses the boundary between two great acts. The transition from one cycle to another generates a turbulence that manifests in every aspect of daily life. The structures that sustain the old world are becoming obsolete because the energy that fueled them has changed. Those who are awakened feel this urgency as a call for a profound updating of their own nature. This is not an intellectual choice, but a necessity for survival in the face of a new vibrational reality. We are crossing the boundary of one of these great cycles now, and the human body feels the pressure. The human body functions like sophisticated hardware capable of processing far more than the logical mind comprehends. Each cell acts as a tiny antenna, capturing frequency variations arriving from deep space. This biological structure is not an accident of nature, but a vehicle designed for navigation in different densities. The central nervous system is now undergoing an information overload that demands immediate updating. What we call unexplained fatigue is in fact the intense work of internal recalibration of our fibers. This organic technology is the only real portal for the integration of the new energies bathing the planet. The science of epigenetics reveals that we are not prisoners of a static and lifeless genetic inheritance. Our genes constantly react to the electrical stimuli generated by our deepest thoughts and emotions. There is an ancestral record imprinted in DNA that contains the wisdom of civilizations that have already lived through this moment. When an individual alters their perception, they send a chemical signal that unlocks latent biological capabilities. These cellular memories function as a navigation map for times of uncertainty and radical transformation. The physical body is the living archive of the entire human journey through the great cycles of time. Through morphic resonance, we perceive that our internal changes instantly affect the collective field. When you stabilize your own biology, you create a trail of information that facilitates the awakening of other beings. Patterns of harmony and health can be transmitted through this invisible field that connects all life. The evolution of consciousness depends on the organism's ability to sustain increasingly higher and more subtle frequencies. We are not alone in this process of mutation, as the Earth itself provides the necessary vibrational support. This profound connection ensures that the wisdom acquired by one becomes accessible to the entire species. The stress we feel today acts as a biological trigger for opening locked genetic doors. Comfort rarely produces evolutionary leaps. Pressure is the true engine of life's improvement. The human body possesses emergency protocols that only activate when the environment becomes hostile. We are now accessing a layer of instinctive intelligence that has been dormant since the last great cycle. This activation allows the individual to see beyond the veil of matter and understand the language of pure energy. Biology is becoming transparent so that the light of consciousness can shine without obstructions or old filters. The awakening of this cellular memory is what allows survival amidst the collapse of old structures. Every atom of your being is vibrating at a new octave to keep pace with the accelerated rhythm of the cosmos. What many interpret as an identity crisis is merely the removal of obsolete layers of personality. The hardware is being cleaned of informational viruses to receive the operating system of a new era. True sovereignty begins when the individual takes command of this divine and conscious biological machine. There is a latent code in your biology that is only activated under conditions of extreme evolutionary necessity. The outside world is beginning to show visible cracks in its most basic foundations. Systems that once seemed unshakable now tremble under the weight of their own obsolescence. This fragmentation is not a random disaster, but an accurate reflection of the internal change occurring in the human collective. As old mental models dissolve, the physical structures built upon them inevitably follow suit. We watch as institutions lose their authority and traditional paths to safety vanish into thin air. This disintegration is the first sign that the old agreement with reality has definitively ended. Destruction is often misunderstood as a purely negative force of nature. In the ancient understanding of the cosmos, the end of a cycle is the obligatory precursor to any new creation. The energy that breaks the stone is the same energy that allows the sculptor to find the hidden form. When a forest burns, the soil is enriched with the minerals necessary for much more resilient growth. Currently, we are witnessing a global process of calcination where everything that is false is being removed. The heat of this transition is uncomfortable because it demands the sacrifice of our most cherished illusions. The chaos we see in the headlines is merely the shadow of a much deeper restructuring of the soul. People feel a strange sense of relief even as they watch the familiar world crumble around them. There is a profound clarity that emerges when you stop trying to fix what was never meant to last. The obsession with maintaining the status quo only creates more friction and suffering for those clinging to the past. By accepting the collapse of these structures, the individual begins to reclaim the energy previously spent in denial. This detachment is the necessary step to move from a state of victimhood to a state of pure observation. As the noise of the collapsing world grows louder, inner vision becomes remarkably clearer. You begin to notice that the crisis is actually a filtering process designed to separate the essential from the trivial. The fear of loss is replaced by a cold, steady awareness of what truly matters for the journey ahead. This is the moment when the observer stops looking for external saviors or solutions in broken systems. Collapse provides the necessary space for a different kind of architecture to be imagined and eventually built. Each fallen pillar represents a liberation from a weight that the human spirit was no longer willing to bear. From the ashes and dust of these ruins, a different frequency of presence begins to manifest in the world. This is not a noisy or aggressive movement, but a silent regrouping of those who have already crossed the threshold. While the masses are distracted by the spectacle of destruction, some are already learning to walk among the rubble without fear. They understand that fragmentation is the birth pang of a reality that can no longer be contained in old vessels. The focus shifts from the tragedy of the end to the silent preparation for a new way of existing. As the world outside fragments, a new kind of individual begins to emerge from the shadows. The weight you feel now is not a mistake or a useless burden. This constant pressure that tightens your chest and accelerates your heartbeat is actually a precision tool. In ancient metallurgy, the most intense fire was reserved for substances that needed absolute purification. You are undergoing a process of emotional calcination where everything superfluous begins to evaporate. The discomfort that arises from seeing old certainties disappear serves to test the resilience of your essence. Without this external force acting on your will, change would be merely an intellectual idea without the power of real transformation. Consider the structure of ordinary carbon, which under extreme conditions reorganizes itself to become something indestructible. Nature doesn't waste energy, and every gram of existential stress you face has a biological and spiritual function. When life pulls the rug out from under you and forces you to bear its own weight, it is strengthening your inner structure. The collapse of modern conveniences pushes consciousness into a state of alert that we rarely access in times of peace. It is precisely in this zone of maximum tension that new neural and intuitive pathways begin to form. The pain that once seemed like punishment now reveals its face as a necessary catalyst for the evolution of your perception. Most people flee from inner conflict by trying to distract their minds with fleeting pleasures or constant denial. However, the modern initiate learns to embrace pressure as the blacksmith embraces the hammer that shapes steel. Each personal crisis is an invitation to observe where your identity is still trapped in forms that no longer serve you. When you stop resisting the friction of reality, the energy spent in combat transforms into fuel for vision. Stress ceases to be an enemy of health and becomes the engine that propels the soul beyond known limits. There is a silent dignity in remaining steadfast while the fire of transition burns away the outer layers of personality. Your physical body also responds to this internal alchemy through subtle changes in blood and brain chemistry. Under high pressure, the organism seeks new forms of balance that conventional science still struggles to explain. You begin to realize that resilience is not about enduring suffering, but about transmuting the burden into absolute clarity. The mind, fragmented by fear, begins to unify around a purpose that transcends the simple desire for survival. This internal restructuring prepares the biological hardware to process information that would previously have been impossible to bear. What once caused panic is now seen as the necessary vibration to awaken what was latent in your genetics. The feeling that something is about to break is not an illusion of your anxiety. This final limit is where human resistance meets the cosmic need for a new beginning. The saturation point has been reached, and the shell that protected your old worldview is full of cracks. There is no going back to the safety of what was known, because that environment no longer exists for you. You are now facing the frontier where personal effort dissolves to give way to a much greater force. The breaking point is near, but it is not the end. It is the opening of the portal of initiation. The portal opens the moment you stop being a victim of circumstances and become the attentive observer of your own life. There is no longer a separation between what happens outside and how your mind processes each event. Modern science finally touches upon what the ancients already knew by describing how the simple act of observing a particle alters its behavior in space. You carry this same power within your eyes and in the intention you project onto the world around you. Being initiated today doesn't require long journeys through deserts or rituals hidden in damp caves. True initiation happens at the center of your daily life when you decide where to place your attention. The ancient masters called this capacity for absolute choice a power that no one can take from you, not even under torture. It is the freedom to decide what meaning to give to each pain, each loss, or each apparent victory. When you master this internal filter, reality ceases to be an impenetrable block of concrete and becomes malleable like clay. The physical world responds to this firmness of spirit by organizing events in a way that mirrors your new posture. You realize that most people live in a state of sleepwalking, reacting mechanically to external stimuli. Breaking this automatism is the first real step towards taking control of your personal destiny. We have reached the point where theory dissolves into the raw practice of transforming matter through pure consciousness. This is the awakening of the modern initiate, the one who understands that their perception is the hammer and anvil of existence. By focusing your gaze on a possibility, you force the universe to collapse all other uncertainties in a specific direction. What was once chaos and informational noise begins to organize itself into clear patterns and opportunities that were previously invisible. The revelation does not come from a sacred book, but from the realization that you are the co-author of the script you are living now. This absolute clarity brings a profound impact that permanently alters your relationship with time and space. Having this heightened perception is not just a gift, but a technical responsibility that demands constant sobriety. Each thought held long enough acts as a silent command sent to the structure of life. If your gaze is fragmented and full of fear, the reality you reap will be equally unstable and dangerous. On the other hand, the vision of one who is awake functions as a beacon that stabilizes the environment around them. You begin to notice that people and situations adjust to the frequency you choose to hold in your heart. The secret of mastery lies in the ability to maintain this sovereign presence even when everything seems to crumble. The transition from passive spectator to conscious creator demands a radical change in how you hold your gaze. It's not enough to simply understand the process intellectually. You need to feel the shift in the vibration of your cells. You are learning to read between the lines of events and to identify the signals that life constantly sends. This new way of interacting with the world deactivates the ego's defenses and opens space for something much more powerful. The fear of uncertainty is replaced by a vibrant curiosity about what your will can manifest next. This new intelligence allows you to see the invisible threads that connect seemingly random events. This expanded vision doesn't depend on physical eyes, but on an understanding that transcends the barrier of linear time. When you stop looking for logical explanations for everything, reality begins to magically organize itself before you. Knowledge ceases to be something you learn and becomes something you simply recognize in the environment. This non-linear intelligence operates in leaps, allowing the solution to a problem to emerge even before the question is formulated. You enter a state of flow where the analytical mind becomes merely a secondary organizational tool. True wisdom now flows effortlessly through a direct connection with the primordial source of life. Synchronicity becomes the official language of this new stage of consciousness, where nothing is truly by chance. Fortuitous encounters and unexpected messages begin to carry a weight of meaning that common reason cannot explain. Carl Jung described this phenomenon as the connection between internal states and external events without a direct physical cause. By observing these patterns, you realize that the universe is in constant dialogue with your deepest intentions. Every small coincidence is a sign that you are aligned with the greater rhythm of the great astronomical cycles. The apparent chaos of the modern world dissolves into a hidden order that only the initiated can decipher. The biological center of this transformation resides in a small gland that functions as a radar for the invisible. The pineal gland is not only a regulator of biological cycles, but also the bridge that connects spatial perception to sacred time. When this sensor is activated, your relationship with your surrounding environment changes definitively and immediately. You begin to feel the vibrations of places and people even before any physical interaction occurs. This sensitivity allows you to navigate crises and turbulence with a calmness that seems supernatural to others. Your body's hardware is being recalibrated to process data that was previously invisible to your limited senses. Traditional logic is a useful tool for building houses, but it is insufficient to comprehend the grandeur of the soul. To access the deepest layers of reality, one must have the courage to abandon the certainties of the intellect. This new form of intelligence allows one to see the totality of a situation without needing to fragment it into smaller pieces. Where most see only confusion and despair, you identify the sacred geometry that sustains the movement of life. This mental clarity removes the weight of doubt and replaces anxiety with a serene readiness to act. The mind expands beyond the limits of the ego and touches the collective consciousness that unites all living beings. Having access to this level of information requires a sobriety that few are willing to cultivate in their daily lives. The revelation of these invisible threads is not a prize for the ego, but a tool for stabilizing the whole. You realize that every thought and every choice you make now has a direct impact on the structure of collective reality. The power to see beyond the veil brings with it the duty to act as a point of equilibrium amidst the storm. Your conscious presence becomes the factor that prevents the system around you from collapsing completely. You are not just watching the change, you are the anchor point so that it does not become pure chaos. The clarity you have gained is not a luxury solely for your personal comfort. Every time you perceive a pattern or anticipate a change, you are actively influencing the outcome of that event. This happens because the observer and the observed are no longer separate entities in this new stage of consciousness. Your gaze functions like a beam of light that stabilizes the molecules of a chaotic environment. When you remain calm in a room full of panic, you create a literal field of coherence where others can lean on you. This is the first level of your new duty to the world. Modern science now confirms what ancient sages always knew about the interconnected nature of all things. In a complex system, a tiny adjustment in one corner can prevent total collapse at the other extreme. You are that minuscule adjustment, a conscious variable capable of altering the trajectory of the entire collective. Your private thoughts and silent choices reverberate outward like a stone thrown into a still lake. No action is too small when performed with the full weight of your perception. The world is not a machine to be repaired, but a living organism that responds to your presence. We are almost finishing this awakening, but before we take the final step, I would like to ask you a sincere favor. Producing these scripts, diving into ancient records, and bringing this awareness to YouTube requires an immense effort and dedication from our entire team. We created our digital ebooks, such as the collection The THOTH Code, with a care that you can feel in every line, transforming this knowledge into something practical for your biology. The great reality is that this channel depends on your support to remain open. We do not have major sponsors. We have you. Buying our books is the way for you to tell us that this content has value and to help us continue producing what you will not find anywhere else. If you feel that this channel is a point of light in your journey, consider helping us today. The link to the ebooks is right below in the first pinned comment. Thank you very much for allowing us to continue this mission. There is an ancient understanding that the world was born in a state of fragmentation and requires human effort to be restored. This repair does not happen through grand political movements or noisy proclamations. It occurs in moments of silence when you choose integrity over convenience or truth over a comfortable lie. By aligning your inner state, you are effectively stitching back together the broken pieces of universal order. Every conscious breath you take acts as a restorative force for the people around you. You are becoming a silent architect of a reality that is still trying to find its ultimate form. This level of influence demands a sobriety that rejects the futile distractions of the modern ego. You can no longer afford to be swept away by every passing wave of social outrage or collective fear. Your role now is to be the eye of the storm, the fixed point around which the whirlwind swirls. This requirement of constant presence may seem burdensome, but it is the price of true initiation. Sobriety means seeing things exactly as they are, without adding your own layers of drama or judgment. Only from this place of neutral power can you truly serve as a stabilizing force. The transition we are experiencing is too volatile to be left to chance or the mechanical laws of matter. Without conscious anchors, the energy of the new cycle would simply destroy the old structures without building anything new in their place. You have been prepared to sustain the frequency of the future while the present is still crumbling before your eyes. Your own existence in a state of alertness provides an invisible model for others to follow. By standing firm in your new perception, you ensure that the inevitable change leads to evolution and not extinction. The true test of this sovereignty will now be found in the most trivial aspects of your daily life. Understanding your influence on the whole now needs to descend from the mind to the hands. It's pointless to sustain the collective field if you're still stumbling in the rush of your mornings. The true test of sovereignty doesn't happen in deep trance states or isolated meditations atop a mountain. It manifests in the way you hold a cup of coffee, or how you respond to an irritating email. Every common gesture is an opportunity to anchor the frequency you've so longed to understand. The sacred is not far from here. It dwells in the precision of your present movement. There is an ancient wisdom that says that before enlightenment, man chops wood and carries water. After enlightenment, the same man continues chopping wood and carrying water, but everything has changed inside. The weight of the bucket is the same, but the internal resistance to effort has completely disappeared. You now perform the automatic tasks of life with an attention that transforms metal into gold. Washing dishes or driving in traffic cease to be obstacles and become extensions of your new state of being. Routine ceases to be a prison when every second is lived with total intention. When your perception aligns perfectly with action, you enter a state of continuous flow. Time seems to bend to your will, and mental fatigue simply ceases to exist. Modern psychology describes this as the pinnacle of human experience, where the self disappears into the task. At this point, you are no longer trying to control reality, you are flowing with it. This absolute integration is what allows you to accomplish the impossible without expending unnecessary energy. It is the moment when technique becomes art and effort becomes grace. Treating the ordinary as something sacred is the greatest act of rebellion an initiate can commit today. The system in which we live thrives on your distraction and your constant desire for something that isn't here. By bringing your full presence to the now, you break the spell of scarcity and the relentless pursuit. Food takes on a more intense flavor, and the colors around you seem to vibrate with their own light. You begin to notice that objects and people respond differently to your conscious touch. Physical reality becomes malleable when treated with the respect it deserves. This constant practice of sovereign presence is what separates the theorist from the true master of oneself. You don't need complex rituals or special robes to validate your inner transformation. Your daily life is the altar where you sacrifice old illusions in favor of stark truth. Every simple decision now carries the weight of an oath sworn to the universe. True initiation is ultimately proven in how you handle the mundane, elevating it to the level of eternity. The warning has been given, the structure is ready, and the invitation now is to walk on your own 2 feet. The circle finally closes in on itself, revealing that the end was never a definitive stopping point. You now face the image of the serpent biting its own tail and understand that renewal requires acceptance of the complete cycle. All the knowledge accumulated up to this point ceases to be a mental burden and transforms into pure instinct for spiritual survival. The journey that began with restlessness in the face of accelerated time ends with the peace of one who masters the rhythm of their own hours. There is no longer a separation between what you have learned and who you have become in this long process of transmutation. The horizon that once seemed distant now unfolds beneath your feet like familiar territory, ready to be explored. Imagine that every choice you make today could be repeated for all eternity in an endless cycle. This idea shouldn't be seen as a heavy burden, but as the ultimate test of your new inner sovereignty. If you can say yes to your life with all your strength, the fear of the unknown loses its power over your actions. The eternal return is the mirror that reflects whether you are truly living your truth or merely following external orders. Every second lived with absolute presence becomes a monument that withstands the wear and tear of centuries and eras. You are now the author of a story that deserves to be told and retold countless times without losing its original brilliance. The ancient figure of the Ouroboros serves as a reminder that life energy is never lost, only transformed into new forms. By accepting that beginning and end occupy the same space, you free yourself from the anxiety of reaching a final destination. The fullness you feel now does not come from having all the answers, but from knowing how to ask the right questions of reality. The world has not changed its physical laws to accommodate your new consciousness, but your interaction with these laws has become masterful. You have learned to read celestial signs and hear the whisper of cells without needing translators or artificial intermediaries. The structure that supported your old beliefs has crumbled to give way to a foundation made of direct experience and constant lucidity. The silence you cultivated in the previous stages now becomes the foundation for a voice that resonates with authority and clarity. Your hands are ready to mold matter according to the vision you honed at the center of your own being. The responsibility of being an anchor point amidst collective chaos is your new and highest purpose in life. Others will notice the sparkle in your eyes and the calmness in your gestures without understanding the pressure you endured to get here. You no longer need external rituals because your own presence has become the sacred act par excellence in daily life. The transition from spectator to co-author of reality is complete, and the world stage awaits your next conscious move. The invitation to walk on your own 2 feet is the final stage of an initiation that never truly ends in linear time. Each step taken from here on carries the weight of millennia of ancestral wisdom and the lightness of a new personal dawn. You look to the past with gratitude for the lessons and to the future with the curiosity of a child who has just awakened. The warning has been delivered, and the seed of change now has roots deep enough to withstand any external storm. The cycle renews itself at this very moment as you breathe and recognize your own divinity in full creative action. The journey begins again now at the center of your own being, and the world bows before your new sovereign will. What a joy to know that you walked with me to the end of this awakening, and to mark this moment of transformation, write the phrase in the comments, "I now activate my light code."